Win one hand of poker for me, the deed is yours. The Mafia boss grinned, the waitress. The smell of old bourbon and fried oysters clung to the velvet curtains of the gilded clock. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the jazz quartet had finally packed up, leaving the supper club to the hollow echo of the ice machine. Port Granite, a hard-shouldered industrial city on the lake, was asleep, but Mara Ellison was wide awake. She stood at the service bar, stacking quarters, dimes, and nickels under the weak utility light. Her fingers, raw from lemon twists and hot plates, separated the crumpled singles from the fives, a pathetic pile. She needed $412 by Friday. The bank did not care about tips. The bank only cared about the foreclosure notice taped to her mother's front door. A vibration shifted through the staff. It was not a sound, but a change in pressure. "Marcelli is on his way," Chef Russo hissed from the kitchen pass-through. His voice, usually a booming opera, now a strained whisper. Instantly, the busboys straightened their spines. The 2 remaining waitresses checked their aprons. The rumor had been simmering all night. Rafe Marcelli, the gentleman boss of the Harbor Line, was bringing a delegation to the club, not for dinner, but for business. Gavin Pike, the floor manager, whose tie was always slightly too tight, burst from his office. He was holding a silver tray bearing a single bottle of Macallan 25 and 4 crystal tumblers. He skidded to a halt in front of Mara. "Ellison, you take this VIP lounge." His eyes darted around, avoiding hers. Mara's hand instinctively went to her empty apron pocket. "Gavin, I'm counting out." "You are not." He pushed the tray into her hands. The weight was solid, expensive. "Just pour. Do not talk. And for God's sake, Mara, do not look him in the eye." Mara hated this. Hated the fear he inspired, the way it made Gavin smell like cheap sweat. But she needed the shift, needed the possibility of a big tip. She balanced the tray, her forearm steady. She had a skill, or perhaps a curse, honed during 2 years dealing blackjack at a border casino that smelled of desperation and stale cigarettes. She read people, not their minds, but their bodies. The jump of a carotid artery, the way a man's fingers drummed on glass when he was lying versus when he was just impatient, the blink rate that signaled a bluff. It was a survival reflex, cataloged and stored. The VIP lounge door swung open. They were already there. The air thickened. 4 men sat in the high-backed leather chairs. 3 were generic, expensive suits. The 4th was Rafe Marcelli. He was not what she expected. He wore a dark blazer, but underneath, instead of a starched shirt, was a simple, thin-knit wool sweater. He looked more like a professor than a crime boss. As he lifted his hand to gesture to one of his men, his blazer cuff pulled back. On the inside of his wrist, Mara saw a fine, silvery line, a scar, thin as thread. It was not a wound of aggression, but something old, almost delicate. The detail was so specific, so human. It unsettled her. She moved, all professional grace. "Gentlemen, Mr. Marcelli." She poured the scotch. Her hands did not shake. She catalogued the tells. The man to Rafe's left tapped his pinky ring. The one across kept his feet flat on the floor, a soldier's posture. Rafe himself was still, his pulse a calm, steady beat visible in his neck. As she bent to place the 4th glass, a man she had not registered a 5th guessed. Standing near the window, turned abruptly. A thin manila envelope, tucked into the breast of his coat, dislodged and slipped free. It fluttered to the carpet and slid, as if propelled by fate, to rest directly against the toe of Mara's black sneaker. No one moved. Mara's training screamed at her to ignore it. Not your table, not your problem, but it was on her foot. She leaned down, picked it up. It was unsealed, inside. She saw not cash, but a single folded document, a photocopy. The masthead read, "Pier 14 Deed." Below it, sketched in black ink, was a perfect, sharp-lined ace of spades. A draft from the back door, left open by the departing musicians, made the heavy chandelier above them chime softly. A discordant, metallic whisper. The background hum of the club died. Rafe Marcelli's eyes, a calm, unreadable gray, lifted from his glass and settled on the envelope in her hand. Mara's blood turned to ice. She had looked him in the eye. From the corner of her vision, at the main bar across the room, she saw the one patron who had not flinched, a woman with hair like spun silver, Etta Vale, a quiet regular who nursed one brandy for 3 hours. Etta met her gaze and gave a short, sharp nod. It was a signal Mara recognized, a gesture from the card tables. Your move. The reflex was instant. Unconscious, Mara's free hand, resting on the service tray, found a stray sugar packet. Her thumb and forefinger turned it sideways on the tray. It was the call signal for a private game. The shift in the room was electric. 3 men in gray suits, seated at a table near the exit, men Mara had not even registered as a group. The Gray Harbor Collective shot to their feet. Their chairs scraped the hardwood, all eyes fixed on Mara. She had just declared her hand, and she did not even know the game. Gavin Pike looked like he was about to faint. The Gray Harbor men took a step forward. Rafe Marcelli watched her, the silent stretching. Then the corner of his mouth tilted in a slow, almost imperceptible smile. He raised his glass. "Wrong signal, kid," he murmured. His voice a low vibration she felt more than heard. He turned his gaze from her to the rest of the tense, silent room. "A toast," he said, his voice now carrying, smooth and commanding, to new ventures and to the staff for their impeccable timing. He drank. The tension snapped. The Gray Harbor men awkwardly sat back down. The pianist, sensing the shift, began a soft blues riff. Rafe Marcelli had just wrapped the entire room around his finger and, in doing so, had pulled Mara back from the ledge she had accidentally stumbled over. She was safe, and she was terrified. Mara escaped the VIP lounge, her heart hammering a rhythm against her ribs that had nothing to do with exhaustion. The envelope was gone, taken by one of Rafe's men with a nod so brief it was barely a movement. She ducked into the kitchen, heading for the staff locker room, needing a single minute to breathe before finishing her count. She never made it. The steam from the industrial dishwasher was thick, smelling of bleach and old food. 2 men stepped out of the walk-in freezer, blocking her path. They did not belong. Their suits were cheap polyester, their shoes had thick rubber soles, and they carried the unmistakable air of bored civic authority. Mara Ellison. The taller one did not ask. He stated. He held up a wallet, flashing a badge too quickly for her to read. "Urban Civic Safeguards. We need a word." "I'm working," Mara said, her voice tight. "You are done for the night," the shorter one said, stepping closer. He smelled like coffee and bad cigars. "We saw your little performance out there, playing footsie with Marcelli." "I did not," she snapped. "You are going to," the tall one said. He leaned against the stainless steel counter, crowding her. "Rafe Marcelli is skimming from the port. We know it. He's using Harbor Line assets to move stolen goods. We need tangible proof." "What does that have to do with me?" "You are going to get it," the shorter one said. He produced a small, foil-wrapped packet. "You are going to plant this in his office, his car, wherever you get the chance. It is a tracker, marked as stolen from a UCS inventory. It will tie him directly to a theft from us." Mara looked at the packet, then at their smug faces. "No." The tall one sighed. 388 South Maple. Your mother's house. The bank takes it Friday at noon. Sad story." Mara's breath hitched. "How did you—" "We do our homework," the tall one said. He pulled out a tiny object. It was a small, enameled flower, a service pin, just like the one on her uniform. "You wear this. It has a microphone. You do what we say. In return, a call is made. The foreclosure is frozen, indefinitely." The air left her lungs. They were offering her mother's house, her only goal, in exchange for a man she had only just seen. "I'm not a criminal," she whispered. "Neither are we. We are the good guys." The shorter one pinned the flower to her apron, his fingers brushing her chest. Mara flinched. "Just get us what we need, and you can go back to counting your pennies." They pushed past her, leaving her shaking in the steam. She walked back onto the floor, the world tilted on its axis. The tiny flower pin felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She grabbed a leather bill clip, but her hand was trembling so violently she could not close the clasp on the check. Here. Rafe Marcelli was beside her. He had moved like smoke. He was holding an empty service tray. "Let me," he said. It was not a request. He took the bill clip from her. His fingers, warm and calloused, brushed the back of her hand as he took it. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but it shot a strange, steadying warmth up her arm, silencing the tremor instantly. He placed the clip on his own tray, then handed her the empty one. "It is easier with 2 hands," he said simply, his gray eyes looking at the tray, not at her. A perfect excuse, a seamless dance of swapped items. He was gone before she could say thank you. She turned, confused by the gesture, and nearly ran into Etta Vale, the silver-haired woman from the bar. Etta was putting on her coat. "That ace of spades," Etta murmured, her voice like dry leaves, not moving her lips. "It is the key. It opens the game at the docklight." She paused, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "Let no one know you saw that deed, not the suits, not the boss." Before Mara could ask what she meant, a new figure approached the VIP table. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, and wore a deep green jade ring on his pinky, carved with a seagull in flight. This must be Archer Cole, the head of the Gray Harbor Collective. "Rafe," he said, his voice smooth as oiled leather. "A pleasure, as always." Rafe nodded, not standing. Archer Cole's eyes slid past Rafe and landed on Mara. He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. It was a look she recognized, the look of a man pricing a horse. She felt like a piece of property. "Get me a brandy," a voice slurred from her right. A drunk patron from a nearby table, emboldened by the late hour, grabbed her arm. "Come on, sweetie. One for the road." He yanked Mara off balance, stumbled backward, the tray flying from her hand. She never hit the floor. An iron-hard arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against a solid chest. With his other hand, Rafe Marcelli, who had moved faster than she could blink, caught the spinning silver tray mid-air. Not a single drop of imaginary liquid spilled. The entire club went silent. Rafe held her for a beat, his hand splayed against her ribs, his other arm holding the tray level. He looked down at her. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she breathed, her face inches from his. He straightened her up, then turned to the drunk man, who had frozen, his face pale. Rafe handed the tray to the man. "I believe you dropped this." The man fumbled, took the tray, and scurried away. As Mara stepped back, smoothing her apron, a voice crackled in her ear from the flower pin. "Now, the scar. Get a picture of his wrist scar. It is the marker from the old violence. We need it for the file." Rafe turned back to his table, his cuff riding up again, revealing the thin, silvery line. Mara instinctively stepped in front of him, blocking the view from the main floor, pretending to retrieve a napkin. It was a small, quiet act of rebellion. She would not be their camera. Archer Cole laughed, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Always the rescuer. Rafe, speaking of property, about Pier 14. Rafe sat. "What about it?" "My collective is prepared to make a final offer," Archer said. "It is not for sale." Everything is," Archer said, leaning in. "But in the interest of good sportsmanship, let us settle it. That pier will change hands, one way or another. How about over a public poker game at the docklight?" Mara watched Rafe. He did not look at Archer. He was watching the bandstand, where the staff was stacking chairs. His gaze, however, seemed to be on her. "When you hear the bell break," he said to her, his voice barely audible, "go to the back door." As if summoned by his words, a busboy, clumsy with fatigue, knocked over the heavy brass service bell from the host stand. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud, shattering crack. Mara did not hesitate. She ran. She pushed through the kitchen doors, past the loading dock, and burst into the alley. A vintage Buick, black as midnight, was idling at the curb. The back door was open. It was not an invitation. It was a command. She slid into the back seat, and the door closed with a heavy, satisfying thunk, sealing off the alley's chill. The car pulled away smoothly, the engine a low purr beneath her feet. The cabin was warm and smelled of old leather and something faintly spicy, like sandalwood. Rafe Marcelli was in the front passenger seat, not the back. A driver she did not recognize was behind the wheel. No one spoke. The city lights of Port Granite smeared past the tinted windows, painting the interior in shifting strokes of neon and shadow. Mara's hands were still locked in a vice grip in her lap. The enameled flower pin felt like it was burning a hole through her apron. Rafe turned slightly in his seat. He was holding a dark gray, heavy-knit wool scarf. "You are cold," he stated. He passed it back to her. She reached for it, her fingers clumsy. His hand met hers as she took the scarf, his skin warm and slightly rough against her own. It was just a brush of knuckles, lasting no more than a second, but an electric current, sharp and unexpected, raced up her arm and settled at the base of her neck. She pulled the scarf into her lap, the wool soft and retaining his warmth. They drove for several minutes, the only sound the rhythmic ticking of the turn signal as they navigated the empty industrial streets. "How much?" Rafe asked, his voice calm. "Do you hate being used as bait?" Mara looked at his silhouette. He was not looking at her, but straight ahead, giving her the courtesy of not being watched. His eyes were not scanning her, judging her, or demanding an answer. He was just listening. The simple, direct question broke something in her. The terror of the last hour, the weight of the foreclosure, the oily pressure from the UCS agents, it all rose in her throat. "My mother's house," she said, her voice shaking but not breaking. "They know about my mother's house. The bank is seizing it on Friday. The men in the kitchen. From UCS. They said they would freeze the foreclosure if I planted something on you, a tracker, and wore a wire." She confessed it all into the warm, dark space. The words tumbled out, stark and ugly. She expected him to yell, to be cold, to tell the driver to pull over and throw her out. Rafe just nodded slowly. He did not touch her pain. He did not offer solutions or threats. He simply let her words hang in the air, and his silence became a strange, unexpected sanctuary. He let her finish, and when she was done, the quiet that returned was not empty, but heavy with acknowledgement. The Buick slowed, turning onto a dark, tree-lined street called Larch. It pulled up to a small, unassuming brick bungalow, the only one on the block with its lights off. "We are here," the driver said. Rafe got out and opened her door. The night air was cold again. "Will you go in first?" he asked. "Or shall I?" He was giving her the choice, giving her control over the threshold. "I will," she said, her voice small. He walked with her to the door, unlocked it, and pushed it open. He stood back, letting her enter the dark hallway first. He followed, closing the door behind them, and the sound of the deadbolt sliding home felt final. He flipped a switch. The light filled a small, clean kitchen. It was dated, with yellow countertops and wooden cabinets, but it was spotless. Mara leaned back against the counter, the adrenaline finally leaving her, making her knees weak. They were standing close, too close for a kitchen this small. The air was charged, their breath mingling in the warm, yellow light, his cool from the outside air, hers hot and shaky. "The scratch on your cheek," he said, his voice low. She had forgotten. The drunk patron had snagged her with a ring. Rafe lifted his hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away. He did not touch her with his palm, but with the back of his hand, his knuckles gently tracing the curve of her cheekbone, purposefully avoiding the raw scrape. His gaze was intense, tracing the line of her jaw, and for a fractional moment, his eyes dropped to her lips. Just as quickly, they returned to her eyes. He was holding a boundary. But Mara was tired of boundaries being set for her, tired of being pushed, pulled, and used. This man had saved her twice tonight, had listened to her, and had not treated her like a pawn. She made the choice. Mara lifted her hand and placed it on his shoulder. She could feel the hard, coiled muscle beneath his blazer and the thin wool of his sweater. She felt him inhale sharply, his body tensing at her touch. She leaned in. It was a slow, deliberate kiss. It was not violent or demanding, but it was deep. His lips were firm and warm, tasting faintly of scotch in the cold night air. For a second he was still surprised, and then he responded. His free hand came up, not to her face but settled firmly on her waist, pulling her flush against him. It was not a gesture of possession but of anchoring. She felt the steady, powerful beat of his heart against her chest, or perhaps it was her own. Her fingers curled into the fabric on his shoulder. His hand on her waist was a solid, grounding pressure. It was a kiss about stability, not conquest. It was about the silence in the car, the warmth of the scarf, and the simple act of being seen as human. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing faster. Their foreheads rested together for a long moment. Rafe let out a short, quiet laugh, a sound of pure surprise. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice slightly rough, "I will take care of your mother's debt. That is simple." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "But tomorrow night, you will teach me how to read a man's blink rate." Mara looked into his gray eyes, seeing no trace of the monster the UCS agents had described. "I will teach you," she said, her voice steady for the first time all night, "if you promise this is not, that I am not just another prize you are trying to win." Rafe's expression became serious. He shook his head, his hand still warm on her waist. "No," he said, "I do not want a prize. I want an ally." He let her sleep for a few hours in a spare room, a simple cot that felt more restful than her own bed. When she woke, the late morning sun was cutting through the blinds, and the smell of strong coffee filled the safe house. Rafe was in the kitchen, dressed as he was before, minus the blazer. He was pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He slid one across the table to her. "My operation is built on logistics," he said, skipping any pleasantries. He needed her to understand the world she had fallen into. "The harbor line is legitimate, mostly. We run cold storage transport, pier elevators, container logistics. The gray area, we mark certain containers for expedited passage, bypassing some red tape. But my rule is absolute. We do not touch civilians. We do not deal in fear." "Archer Cole does," Mara said, wrapping her hands around the hot mug. "Archer Cole is a different animal." Rafe leaned against the counter, his eyes fixed on the street outside. "The Gray Harbor Collective does not build. It acquires. By force. They use predatory loans, aggressive lawyers, and bought city officials. They specialize in real estate, strangling small businesses on the waterfront and then taking their property." "With a card game," Mara said. He nodded. "The Docklight, it is his masterpiece of legal fiction. It operates under an old, obscure city charter as a private arbitration club. The rules are simple. 2 parties can, if they both agree, settle a dispute of ownership over a single hand of poker. A private notary from a Bureau of Maritime Title Registry, a shell corporation Archer created, is always present to sign the transfer. And it's legal. Just barely. He turns extortion into a spectator sport." "And he wants Pier 14, Mara said. "He needs it." Rafe's voice went quiet. "Pier 14 is not just a pier. Behind the main cold storage, built into the bedrock, is a sublevel. It's where Archer's father, the man who founded the collective, kept his real ledgers, the ones that detail every bribe, every judge, every city councilman they have owned for the last 30 years. Archer keeps the tradition. Whoever controls that pier controls the entire city's chain of corruption." Mara processed this. The envelope, the ace of spades. It was not just a deed, it was a key to everything. The woman at the bar, Etta Vale, she signaled me. She knew about the ace. A rare, genuine smile touched Rafe's mouth. "Etta is the godmother of the port. She holds all the old debts, knows all the secrets. She was running dockside payroll when I was just a kid, still hauling frozen containers in the ice. She saved my life more than once. If Etta signaled you, She sees something in you. I see things in them, too, Mara said, finding her footing. Archer, the man with the seagull ring. He has a tell. Rafe turned, his full attention on her. Go on. When he was bluffing you at the club, proposing the game, he licked his upper lip, just the right side. It was fast, but it was there. And his men, the three in gray who stood up. They twist their rings when they are nervous. It is a group tell. They are not as solid as they look. Rafe studied her, a new respect in his eyes. He walked to a desk in the corner and came back with a small, leather-bound notebook. He handed it to her. She opened it. It was not words, but a strange code. T-click, pause, click, Louboutin on terrazzo, equal sign. Approaching threat, unhurried. Glass on wood, highball, no coaster, equal sign. Nervous, first meet. Music tempo, +2, BPM, equal sign. Covering argument in back room. I cannot read eyes like you, Rafe said, but I listen. I catalog the rhythm of the room. The entire city has a heartbeat. You turn sight into data. I do the same with sound. Mara looked up from the book, a plan beginning to form in her mind, a way to combine their skills. Across town, in a sterile office high-rise, acting director Bryn Mallory of the Urban Civic Safeguards was ripping off her headset. She'd been listening to the entire feed from the enameled flower pin, which Mara had left on her apron, now hanging on a hook in the safe house bathroom. The audio was clear. He is training her, Bryn said to her two agents, her voice triumphant. He called her an ally. This is better than we hoped. She paced, her mind racing. He will bring her to the docklight. She will be his good luck charm, his server right at his shoulder. This is our opening. She turned to the shorter agent. I want a marked deck, a clean one, invisible to the naked eye, but readable to you. She's going to swap that deck onto Archer's tray just before the final hand. We will get them both. Archer for the illegal gambling and Marcelli for the cheat. We will seize the pier in the confusion, and I will get my grand slam bust. Back in the safe house, Mara walked into the bathroom. She saw her reflection, tired but determined. She started to unpin the enameled flower from her apron, intending to throw it away. She froze. Her blood ran cold, colder than the porcelain sink under her hands, the pin, the microphone. It had been in the kitchen when she confessed. It had been on her apron, hanging just feet away when Rafe had explained everything. Pier 14, the ledgers, Etta, their entire strategy. They had heard it all. She stood paralyzed, caught in a perfect three-way trap. There was the new, fragile trust with Rafe, a man who had just promised to save her mother's home. There was the debt itself, the reason she was in this mess. And there was the cold, hard leverage of the UCS, an organization that now knew everything and would not hesitate to crush her to get what it wanted. The night before the game was a furnace of focused preparation. The small safe house kitchen, which had felt claustrophobic, transformed into a laboratory for human tells. A bluff is not just a lie, it is a performance, Mara explained, her voice steady. She was back in her element, the fear replaced by analytical coldness. You have to look for the anti-tell, the thing they do to look relaxed that is actually harder than relaxing. Such as, Rafe was a focused student. All the power he held in the city was now condensed into the act of listening. The fake yawn threshold, and she said, a real yawn is involuntary. The muscles in the jaw and throat clutch. A fake one is just a performance of air. Watch his jaw and his glass. She placed a tumbler on the counter. You set your glass down. He did. Wrong. She slid it 2 millimeters to the left. You place it here. It cuts off his peripheral view of your left hand. It forces him to turn his head, not just his eyes, to see if you are checking your cards. You force him to make a move. He nodded, absorbing it. Now you, he said, his voice low. Your hands. You cannot tremble. Not once. I know. Give me your hand. She hesitated, then put her hand in his. He did not just hold it. He turned her, guiding her hand, and slipped it into the side pocket of his blazer as he put the jacket on. "If you are standing behind me," he said, "this is your anchor. Put your hand in." She did. It was instantly, shockingly intimate. His body heat enveloped her fingers through the thin lining. She was standing pressed against his side, her arm locked to his body. "I will move," he murmured. "You move with me. We have to be one person. We need a rhythm." He shifted his weight, and she moved with him. It was a slow, shuffling circle in the tiny kitchen. Not a dance, but something more fundamental. She could not tremble when she was anchored to him. "The club music is always 4/4 time," he said. He adjusted his stance, one hand finding her waist, the other still allowing her hand to stay buried in his pocket. They moved, finding the slow, steady rhythm. The space between them evaporated. His forehead brushed hers, then rested there. Her nose brushed his temple. "I hear your heart," she whispered, her ear just inches from his chest. It was not fast. It was a heavy, measured beat, a metronome. "This is the pace," he said, his voice a vibration she felt through her hand. "We hold this, no matter what." The moment was broken by the buzz of his phone on the counter. He pulled back. The spell snapped. He read the text, and his face hardened. "Intel," he said, "from Edda's source. Gray Harbor is not leaving it to chance. They are installing a micro-vibrator under my chair, subsonic, designed to break concentration." "They are cheating." "They were always going to cheat," Rafe said. "But now we know how, and we can use it." He looked at her, his eyes sharp. "The UCS is listening. They want to catch me cheating. Archer wants to cheat me. What if we let Archer think you are the UCS pawn? We let him think you are there to swap the deck." "He already suspects me." "Exactly. We let him watch you. While he is watching you, he is not watching me swap the chair." "I am the bait," she said, the word sour. "You are the matador's cape," he corrected, "the thing he cannot stop watching." Before the plan could settle, her own phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Her blood went cold. She answered. "Miss Ellison." The voice was female, sterile and cold. "Bryn Mallory. We trust you are enjoying the accommodations." Mara looked at Rafe, her eyes wide. He was watching her, unblinking. "We are accelerating the timeline," and Mallory said, "You will swap the marked deck onto Archer's tray. The final hand. No excuses. If you fail, the eviction order on your mother's house is being activated at 8 a.m. Tomorrow, not Friday, tomorrow morning." The casual cruelty, the bureaucratic violence of it, made Mara nauseous. "You cannot. That is illegal." "We are the law, sweetheart. Her belongings will be on the curb before lunch." The line clicked dead. Mara's knees buckled. She sat heavily in a kitchen chair. Tomorrow morning, they are kicking her out. 8 a.m. Rafe knelt in front of her. "They are bluffing, Mara. They are trying to panic you." "It does not feel like a bluff." Her eyes darted around the room, frantic, and landed on her small running bag, which she had retrieved from her locker. Inside was the old stopwatch her mother had given her, the memento from her first 5K run. It had a memo function, a voice recorder. She stood up, her movements jerky. "I need air. I need to go outside." "Mara?" "Just on the porch, please." He nodded, giving her space. She grabbed the stopwatch, her fingers fumbling, and stepped out into the night. A cold, fine rain was falling, slicking the concrete stoop. She pressed the small record button, then dialed the number back. Mallory picked up on the second ring. "What?" "I want to hear it again," Mara said, deliberately letting her voice shake. "Tell me what happens if I do not do it." "You are testing my patience." "Tell me." "You fail. Your mother is homeless by 8 a.m., Mallory hissed. "We have the writ. It is done. Now get back inside and do your job." Click. Mara stopped the recording. She stared at the small device in her hand. She had it. Proof. A tiny, cold piece of leverage. She turned. Rafe was standing in the doorway. He had seen the stopwatch. He did not ask. The rain was picking up, turning from mist to a steady, cold downpour. She stepped out into it, letting the icy water hit her face, wash away the feeling of violation. "They think they have me," she said, her voice hollow. "They think they can just move the pieces." Rafe stepped out onto the porch with her, the rain instantly plastering his sweater to his chest. "They are wrong." "Am I?" She looked at him, rain dripping from her hair, her anger rising. "I am still the girl counting quarters. I am still terrified of losing that house." "Good," he said. She stared at him, baffled. "Good. It means you are fighting for something real, not just the pier, not for me, for her." He was not trying to fix it. He was validating the entire terrified mess of her, the tension of the night, the fear, the strange intimacy of their training. It all crested. She grabbed the front of his sweater, her knuckles brushing the hard plane of his chest, and pulled him forward, crashing her mouth against his. This was not the gentle kiss from before. This was a raw, ignited spark in the middle of the storm. His surprise lasted only a heartbeat. He responded, his hands coming up, one tangling in her rain-soaked hair, the other gripping the back of her neck, holding her steady. It was a deluge. His lips were firm, demanding, and she met his pressure, her fingers digging into his shoulders. He backed her against the rough brick wall of the house, shielding her from the wind. The kiss was long, deep, and unbroken, a silent conversation of shared adrenaline and stolen trust. She could taste the rain and the faint, metallic trace of fear, but beneath it was him, solid and warm. They finally broke apart, not because they wanted to, but because they needed air. They stood forehead to forehead, chests heaving, their breath pluming in the cold night. A quiet, breathless laugh escaped him. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he whispered, "I do not need you to choose me, Mara. Just do not choose your fear." A car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the rain. It was Etta Vale. She emerged, holding an umbrella, and walked up to the porch. She glanced at their soaked forms and raised a single silver eyebrow, but said nothing of it. She held out her hand to Mara. In her palm was a small, heavy piece of metal, an ace of spades, crafted from dark, polished steel. "This was the first card ever played at the docklight," Etta said. "It is a token of intent. When you truly need it, when the moment is absolute, put this on the table. It stops the game. It forces a reset." Mara closed her hand around the cold metal. "It is time," Etta said, looking at her watch. "The doors open at midnight." The docklight was not a room. It was a scar on the water, healed over with purple light. It was a massive, permanently moored platform just off the industrial yards, connected to the shore by a single, vibrating steel gangplank. The air inside smelled of low tide, expensive cigars, and rust. It operated in a legal shadow, technically part of the lake, not the city. Deep purple neon tubes along the low ceiling were the only real light, painting the patrons' faces in a bruised, aquatic glow. The rules were simple. Posted at the door. No telephones, no weapons. The third unwritten rule was the most important cheating was a crime, but a clever trick was a victory. In the precise center, on a raised dais, sat the table. This was where the real business happened, a stage for legal theft. Archer Cole was already seated, his jade seagull ring looking almost black in the purple light. He looked comfortable, like a man in his own living room. Opposite him sat Rafe Martelli, his posture and exercise in casual relaxation, and at the head of the table, looking pale and formal, sat the notary from the Bureau of Maritime Title Registry. His briefcase was open, the heavy brass seal resting on a black velvet cloth, ready to validate the transfer. Mara stood at Rafe's left shoulder, the official private server. Her silver tray held a single glass of water, her license to be close. She had refused the enameled flower, but the UCS had provided an alternative, a simple silver bracelet, snapped onto her wrist, allegedly a velocimeter, a high-tech way to read her stress, to ensure she followed orders. The game began, not with the peer, but with small, probing hands. Archer played just as Mara had profiled, tight and aggressive. He raised high, he bullied, he built his image as a man who did not bluff. Rafe, by contrast, seemed sloppy. He called too often, he folded to Archer's raises. He lost the first hand, the second, and the third. A steady stream of his chips moved across the green felt, adding to Archer's growing fortress. Archer's smile got wider. He was enjoying the spectacle, savoring the kill. Rafe was letting him, feeding his arrogance. Mara waited, her senses screaming. She needed to find the cheat. She placed a tall, thin champagne flute, filled with water, on the small service stand beside Rafe's chair, for 2 hands. It was still... Then, on the 6th hand, she saw it. A tremor, a series of microscopic, concentric rings appeared on the water's surface, vibrating at a frequency just below sound. It was the subsonic pulse, the tool to break Rafe's concentration. She leaned in, her voice a professional whisper. "Mr. Marcelli, I'm so sorry." She let her tray dip, and a linen napkin slid off, landing by his feet. She bent low, shielded by the table. "The chair," she whispered. Rafe did not miss a beat. "My apologies, gentlemen," he said to the table, standing up. As he rose, he appeared to be helping her, but his foot hooked the leg of an identical, empty spare chair at the table, in one fluid, seamless motion. He kicked his compromised chair forward and pulled the new, clean chair back, sitting down before Archer had even looked up from stacking his new chips. Mara rose, her face a mask of polite embarrassment. "My apologies." She had barely straightened when the voice crackled in the tiny receiver hidden in her hair. "Bryn Mallory. Good girl. Now the final phase. The marked deck is on Archer's service tray. We have confirmed, at the big hand, you will spill a drink on the table. In the confusion, you switch the decks. You swap ours in." Mara's blood ran cold. They wanted her to execute the cheat, to frame them both. She felt the heavy, cold steel of the metal ace in her pocket. Her hand went to her hair, a gesture of nerves, and her fingernail pressed the off switch. The tiny click in her ear was followed by a profound, total silence. She was on her own. At that moment, Etta Vale appeared, moving silently through the crowd. She walked past the table, nodding at the notary. As she passed Archer, a folded shipping invoice slipped from her sleeve, landing face up on the felt. Archer's eyes, which had been scanning the room, snapped down to it, his pupils, wide in the dim light, contracted to pinpricks. It was not curiosity. It was the physical shock of deception revealed. Rafe saw the tell. Mara saw it. Archer had seen the Harbor Line invoice and knew he was being played. Rafe pushed his small stack of chips forward. He did not look at Archer. His eyes lifted just a fraction. Finding Mara's, he did not speak, but the question was absolute. "Do you trust me?" Mara held his gaze. She did not nod. She gave a single, slow blink. Yes. That was all he needed. "Enough," Rafe said, his voice cutting the smoke. He looked at the notary. "We are here for the pier. Let's stop wasting each other's time." He turned to Archer. "One hand, the winner takes Pier 14. Archer, still rattled by the invoice, laughed, but it was brittle. "You do not have the chips to cover that, Rafe." "I do not need them," Rafe said. "The pier is the stake. One hand, all or nothing." The notary cleared his throat, his eyes darting to Archer. Archer nodded, his arrogance returning. "Fine. One hand." The entire club, which had been a low roar, went utterly silent. The dealer, his hands suddenly shaky, collected the cards. "One hand decider," the dealer announced, his voice hoarse, "for the title to Pier 14. As the dealer began his final, precise shuffle, Mara stepped forward. She reached into her apron pocket and drew out the solid, heavy, steel ace of spades. She placed it on the green felt, right on the betting line. It landed not with a click, but a deep, resonant thud. It was not a card. It was a anchor. The game was locked. The challenge was set. Across the dark, churning water, on the opposite on a state-owned pier, acting director Bryn Mallory lowered her binoculars. She was cold, but her ambition burned hot. Her Urban Civic Safeguards tactical team waited around her, shadows among the shipping containers. "He is in there," she said, her voice sharp in the night air. "They are playing. The moment we get the signal that the cheat is in play, we move. I want that pier sealed as a crime scene before dawn." She smiled, a thin, reptilian expression. "I want Marcelli, I want Cole, and I want that pier." Inside the docklight, the low purple lights dimmed further. As if by command, the effect was immediate. The room, already tense, now felt like a pressurized submarine. All the available oxygen and light drawn to the single, glowing green felt table in the center. Archer Cole was leaning forward. A fine, oily sheen of sweat had appeared on the back of his neck, visible above his starched collar. His jade seagull ring, the one he wore as a sign of his power, was now his betrayer. It twisted around his pinky, stopped, then twisted again. It was the desperate, repetitive motion of a man trapped. He was bluffing, and he was bluffing badly. Rafe Marcelli, by contrast, was a portrait of absolute stillness. He sat back in his chair, his spine straight, his shoulders relaxed. Mara could see the slow, steady pulse in his neck. He was breathing just as she had taught him. In for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Out for 4 seconds. A steady, internal rhythm. As the dealer prepared to lay the flop, Mara took a matching breath. She lifted her hand from the service tray. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her palm on Rafe's shoulder. It was a gesture that could be misread by the room as a simple, supportive touch. But for them, it was a physical connection, an anchor. She felt the hard, coiled muscle beneath his blazer. She was grounding him, and he was grounding her. "I am here. We are one rhythm." The dealer burned a card. He turned the flop. A king of clubs, a 7 of diamonds, a 2 of hearts. The board was scattered, unhelpful. Archer, who'd been waiting for this moment, took his chance to represent a monster hand. 20,000 he snapped, pushing a high stack of chips forward. It was a massive overbet, a clumsy, brutal attempt to buy the pot immediately. The crowd murmured. Rafe did not look at Archer. He looked at the cards. He seemed as calm as if he were listening to rain on a tin roof. "I will call," he said, his voice even. He slid the required chips forward. The dealer burned another card. He turned the turn. The ace of spades. A collective, hissing intake of breath swept the room. It was the card from the deed, the card from the envelope, the card now sitting in cold steel on the table. It felt like destiny. Archer Cole's eyes widened, and he could not stop it. His tongue darted out, a quick, wet slash, licking the right side of his upper lip. The tell. He was terrified. Mara's breath caught in her throat. She bit down hard on her own bottom lip, her nails digging into her palms. She kept her hand firmly on Rafe's shoulder, forcing her own calm into him. At that exact second, 2 blocks away, 2 of Rafe's men dressed in Harbor Line maintenance uniforms used a simple key, not a lockpick, to open the sub-level utility door of Pier 14. Etta Vale, sitting in her dark sedan at the end of the street, looked at her antique pocket watch. The sweep was timed to the minute. Inside the cold, damp vault, the men did not look for cash. They opened a large, insulated floor safe. Inside were the ledgers, decades of them. They worked in silence. Their only sound the metallic click and bright flash of a camera, documenting every page, every bribe, every name, every sin of the Gray Harbor Collective. Back at the docklight, the air was unbreathable. The dealer burned his final card, the river, the Queen of Spades. The board now read King, 7, 2, Ace, Queen. Archer Cole saw his last chance. He had nothing. He had a Jack of Spades and a 10 of Spades in his hand. His draw had missed. He had, quite literally, nothing. He had to make the bluff of his life. "All in," he roared, his voice cracking. He pushed his entire mountain of chips, his entire fortune into the center of the table. The sound was a desperate avalanche of clay. The notary from the Bureau of Maritime Title Registry, sensing the end, reached into his briefcase. He placed the heavy brass seal on the table. The docklight was a tomb. Everyone was looking at Rafe. Rafe Marcelli was not looking at the cards. He was not looking at Archer. He slowly turned his head, his body still, and looked up at Mara. His gray eyes were clear, asking the final, silent question. She had seen it all. The sweat, the ring, the desperate, panicked lick of the lips on the turn. He was screaming his weakness. She met Rafe's gaze. She gave one sharp, definitive nod. He is empty. Rafe turned back to the table. "I call," he said. The words were quiet, but they cut through the room like a blade. He turned over his cards, the ace of diamonds, the queen of diamonds. Archer Cole's face collapsed, a mask of total ruin. He stared, uncomprehending. He flipped his own cards over in a gesture of pathetic defeat, the jack of spades, the 10 of spades, a busted draw, ace high. Rafe's two pair, aces and queens, had hit on the river. A single, unified gasp. Archer Cole had lost. He had bluffed his entire empire away. The notary, pale but professional, pulled the Pier 14 deed forward. He uncapped his pen. He signed. He took the heavy brass seal, lifted it, and with a heavy, final thud, he embossed the paper. "The transfer is complete, men," the notary announced, his voice trembling. "Title to Pier 14 is awarded to Mr. Marcelli." A cheer started to erupt from the back, but it was strangled in its cradle. The heavy steel doors of the gangplank burst open, slamming against the walls. Bright white floodlights bleached the purple room, turning everyone into stark, terrified silhouettes. "UCS!" A voice screamed over a bullhorn. "Nobody moves!" Bryn Mallory stepped onto the platform, her face a mask of absolute triumph, her tactical team swarming in behind her. "Arrest them all!" The tactical floodlights bleached all the color from the room, turning the purple velvet and green felt into a stark, gray and white photograph of a crime scene. Bryn Mallory stood in the center, a shark that had just breached the water. "This entire proceeding is contaminated," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "This was a collusive action to transfer assets under criminal duress. I am seizing this platform and everything on it." She pointed directly at Mara. "And I am arresting you, Miss Ellison, for obstruction and conspiracy." Two UCS agents, their faces hidden behind black balaclavas, moved toward her. Rafe did not move, but his body became a wall, shielding Mara's side. "Wait!" Mara's voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence. She stepped out from behind Rafe. Her hand dove into her apron pocket and came out with the small, silver stopwatch. "What is that, a toy?" Bryn sneered. The docklight, for all its illicit reputation, had a state-of-the-art sound system. Mara saw the auxiliary panel on the wall near the bar, the one used for house announcements. She lunged for it, yanking the small adapter cable free and jamming it into the stopwatch's headphone port. "It is evidence," Mara said. She pressed play. A loud electronic crackle, then silence, and then Bryn Mallory's own voice, cold and precise, exploded from every speaker in the club. "We are accelerating the timeline. You will swap the marked deck. Subit. If you fail, the eviction order on your mother's house is being activated at 8 a.m. Tomorrow, Saturwanis." The room, held in a paralysis of fear, now became a tomb of stunned silence. The recording continued. Every patron, every dealer, and every single one of Bryn's own UCS agents hearing the raw, illegal threat. "Her belongings will be on the curb before lunch." Bryn's face, a mask of triumph seconds before, collapsed. "Turn it off, that is doctored, turn it off now." But the recording played to its end, clicking into silence. In the back shadows, near the exit, Etta Vale lowered a heavy, old-fashioned satellite phone. She had not been watching the game. She had been uploading. The photographs of Archer Cole's black ledgers were now simultaneously in the hands of the Port Granite Times and the encrypted server of the Port Ethics Authority. "You are under arrest," Bryn shrieked, her voice cracking, her authority evaporating. She grabbed for Mara, abandoning all pretense of procedure. "You are assaulting a federal officer. You are—" She was cut off, not by Rafe, but by his voice. He stepped forward, his body moving like a panther, and took Mara's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Director Mallory," Rafe said, his voice a calm, cold counterpoint to her hysteria. "She's not assaulting anyone. This woman is a protected witness." He scanned the room, his gaze landing on the notary. "She is, as of 5 minutes ago, a registered confidential informant for the Port Ethics Authority." The mention of the PEA, the one clean agency in the city, changed the air. It was a checkmate. While all eyes were on the standoff, Archer Cole made his move. He slid away from the table, his chair whispering on the carpet, and darted toward the kitchen exit. He was 2 feet from freedom when 2 massive docklight security guards, who had been neutral observers all night, stepped out of the alcove. "Sir," the first guard said, his voice utterly flat, "House rules. The transaction is not complete until all parties are safely escorted out. You were found to be in violation of the club's charter. You must remain." Archer slammed his fist against the door, trapped. At the main table, the UCS agents were looking at each other, their weapons lowered. They had heard their commander threaten a civilian's family. They had heard the PEA invoked. They were soldiers, but they were not Bryn's private army. "I gave you an order," Bryn screamed at them. "Stand down, Director," one of her own men said, his voice grim. Rafe, in a gesture of profound non-violence, released Mara's hand. He walked to the notary's table. He picked up the signed, sealed deed and the keys to Pier 14. He did not pocket them. He turned to the pale, terrified notary. "Please hold these in escrow," he said calmly, "pending certification from the PEA. We will do this by the book." He had won, and he was giving the victory to the process. Mara stepped forward, her shoulders shaking but her voice strong. She looked at the UCS agents. "I'm not a criminal. I am a waitress. Your boss used my mother's life to force me into this. I was caught between 2 sides, so I chose a third one. I choose justice, not violence." "That is enough," Bryn roared, her hand flying to the holster on her hip. "You are all—" "Bryn Mallory." The voice was new. It came from the gangplank. 2 men in immaculate gray suits stood where the tactical team had been. They were flanked by 4 new UCS officers, their uniforms identical save for a single gleaming gold eagle patch on the shoulder. The Civic Oversight Wing, Internal Affairs. "You are under arrest," the lead agent said, his voice holding no emotion, "for the coercion of a civilian witness, conspiracy to commit fraud, and abuse of federal authority." As her own Internal Affairs Division cuffed her, Bryn Mallory looked stunned. The agents who had been with her all night refused to meet her gaze. They simply stepped back, making a path. The oversight agent nodded to the docklight security holding Archer. "Detain Mr. Cole. The PEA will be here in 5 minutes to pick him up." The tactical lights were gone, the heavy, oppressive white light vanished, and the club was plunged back into its soft, conspiratorial purple glow. The silence was absolute. The standoff was over. The guns were being holstered. Then, from a corner table, a woman laughed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure, unadulterated relief. Someone else let out a long, shaky breath. A glass clinked. The room, which had been braced for a massacre, did not explode into gunfire. It erupted into 1,000 quiet sounds, a nervous cough, a chair scraping, the low, rising murmur of a storm that had just broken. Dawn was breaking over Port Granite, painting the industrial gray sky with strokes of bruised purple and cold, watery gold. The wind off the lake was sharp, smelling of diesel and damp steel. Mara stood on the flat roof of the Pier 14 warehouse, the epicenter of the entire night's storm. Below, the pier was quiet, secured by the legitimate, uniformed officers of the Port Ethics Authority. The chaos of the docklight felt 1,000 miles away. "You're cold," a voice said. Rafe was behind her. He had shed his blazer somewhere, but he was holding his heavy wool coat. He did not just hand it to her, he draped it over her shoulders, his hands lingering, his fingers finding her upper arms and rubbing, generating a small, fierce warmth that had nothing to do with the coat. "Thank you," she whispered, sinking into the impossible warmth of it. It smelled like him, sandalwood and the faint, cold night air. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city wake up. "So, what now?" Mara asked, her voice almost lost in the wind. "Am I one of yours, a piece you won?" He turned to face her, his hands still resting on her arms, his gaze serious. "Is that what you think this was a prize?" "I do not know what it was," she said honestly, the adrenaline finally gone, leaving only a vast, trembling exhaustion. "I know I have a name. Mara Ellison. I am a waitress who needed to save her mother's house. I do not want to be a mafia boss's girl. I need to be me." He nodded. A slow, understanding movement. "I'm not looking for a trophy. Mara, I am not looking for a statue to put on a pedestal. I told you, I wanted an ally." He looked out at the water, his expression unreadable. "The game last night, it stopped being about the pier the moment you put that steel ace on the table. It became about what you believed was right. I found myself wanting to believe in it, too." The admission hung in the cold air, a fragile, startlingly honest thing. The raw light of the new day, the quiet, the shared victory after so much terror it all conspired against her. She looked at him, at this man who was a criminal, a logistics king, a protector, and, for one night, her student. She saw the man, not the legend. Mara reached up, her fingers, still raw from her shift, finding the collar of his shirt. She took the front of his sweater, just as she had in the rain. She pulled him toward her. This kiss was not the desperate, rain-soaked collision on the porch. This was the aftermath. It was slow and deep and certain. His hands found her waist, his fingers lacing together at the small of her back pressed against the warm, rough-sawn wood of the roof's utility shed. Her other hand came up, her fingers tangling in his hair. It was a kiss of profound relief. She tasted coffee on his breath and the salt of the lake air on his skin. His heart was hammering against her chest, a fast, uncontrolled rhythm, so different from the measured beat at the safe house. The pace quickened, a flare of the fire from the night before, a recognition of the spark that had been burning under the surface. Then, just as quickly, it slowed, becoming something else, a promise. A pair of seagulls cried out, a sharp, lonely sound breaking the dawn. They pulled apart, but only by inches. Their foreheads rested together. His eyes, no longer guarded, smiled into hers. She leaned her head against his chest, her ear finding the new, steadier rhythm of his heart, the anchor. He held her, his chin resting on the top of her head, one hand stroking her hair. He bent and pressed a soft, warm kiss to her forehead, a gesture not of possession, but of protection. "Your name is clear." They both turned. Etta Vale stood at the roof's access door, holding a small, metal box. She walked toward them, her own coat collar turned up against the wind. "I just spoke with the PEA," Etta said, her voice crisp. "Your mother's house is secure. The debt was reallocated to the city as part of Bryn Mallory's restitution fund. It is paid in full." Mara felt tears, hot and sudden, well in her eyes. "Thank you." "Do not thank me," Etta said. She opened the metal box. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, was a set of old-fashioned keys and the newly stamped deed to Pier 14. She lifted the heavy paper and the keys and placed them, not in Rafe's hand, but in Mara's. "The title is in your name. You are the proprietor." Mara stared at her, stunned. "What? No, Rafe won." Rafe was watching her, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips. "I won the hand," he said, his voice a low, teasing rumble. "But I was thinking it all night. Win one hand of poker for me. The deed is yours." Mara let out a small, teary laugh, the tension of a lifetime breaking. "I won, but we won." "So, what now, boss?" Rafe asked her, his eyes dancing. She looked at the keys in her hand, then at the sprawling warehouse beneath her feet, and finally at the port. Waking up for a new day. "This is not ours," Finmara said, finding a new, stronger voice. "It belongs to the port. We make it clean. We turn it into the Sunrise Cold Food Station, a real one, a non-profit. We use your trucks, your logistics. But it serves the community. We cut out the dark money for good." Rafe's smile widened. "I knew I wanted an ally." The moment was perfect. Clean as the new morning, it was shattered by the buzzing of Mara's phone. It was the only thing still in her apron pocket. She pulled it out. An unknown number. A new text message. She read it aloud, her voice faltering. "The game is not over." It was not signed, but at the bottom of the text was a single, tiny, text-based icon, a seagull. The public hearing of the Port Ethics Authority was held not in a courtroom, but in a sanitized, beige conference room that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner. It was a place designed to drain the life from any drama, but the air was electric. Bryn Mallory, in a stark gray suit, her face stripped of all authority and replaced with a venomous desperation, was first to testify. "The entire operation at the docklight was a setup," she said, her voice sharp. Miss Ellison was a plant by Marcelli to illegally seize assets. The recording she presented was coerced, edited, and invalid. It was a good performance, but the PEA chairman, a man with tired eyes, had the stopwatch recording, the UCS logs, and Etta's photographs. Then came Archer's lawyer, a man whose suit probably cost more than Mara's mother's house. "My client is also a victim," he said smoothly, "a victim of a collusive game. But more importantly, the PEA's entire case rests on the docklight transaction, and we have discovered the docklight's original operating charter, the very one that allows for these arbitrations, is fundamentally invalid." The room stiffened. Rafe, sitting in the front row behind Mara, did not move, but she felt his focus narrow. "How so?" the chairman asked. "The original registration from 1903 was improperly filed. It is a procedural error, but a fatal one. The transaction is void. The deed reverts to my client." A smug silence filled the room. Archer, sitting at the defense table, permitted himself a small, cruel smile. "Excuse me." The voice was thin and reedy. It was the notary from the BMTR, the pale man who had stamped the deed. He had been called as a witness. "That is not entirely correct." The lawyer turned on him. "Are you a legal expert, sir?" "No," the notary said, adjusting his glasses. "But I am an expert on the charter. You are right, the registration was flawed, but the addendum, filed in 1904, which is valid, corrects it." "And what does this addendum state?" the chairman asked, leaning forward. The notary swallowed. "It states that, in the event of a public dispute regarding the charter's validity, the dispute must be settled in the manner of the club's founding." He looked down, deeply embarrassed. "It must be settled by a single hand of poker, played in public." The room dissolved. Reporters laughed. The chairman banged his gavel. "This is a hearing, not a casino." "It is, sir," the notary said, his voice gaining a desperate strength. "It is a binding clause. If you invalidate the transaction without this final step, you will be in violation of the charter. Archer Cole will be able to sue the city and the PEA, and he will win." The chairman, seeing the trap, looked at his own legal counsel, who nodded grimly. The ancient, absurd law was a legal knot. "For the sake of absolute transparency," the chairman announced, his voice heavy with distaste, "the PEA will honor this clause. This one hand will finalize the matter, and its result will be legally binding. It will be played here, now." "A moment," Archer's lawyer said. "The game was between my client and Mr. Marcelli. But Mr. Marcelli has been identified as a party of interest in a separate investigation. He cannot be allowed to benefit from a game he instigated. He is right, the chairman said. Mr. Marcelli is barred from playing. A unified gasp. Archer was smiling. He had just been handed a default victory. No, Mara said, standing up. The deed is not in Mr. Marcelli's name. It is in mine. The chairman looked at his papers. She is correct. Mara Ellison, proprietor. Then you will play Miss Ellison. Rafe stood, turning to her. The entire room, the lawyers, the agents, faded away. He put his hands on her shoulders, just as he had on the roof. He leaned in, and his voice was a low, steady rumble just for her. Win one hand of poker for me. The deed is yours, he said, the words now a shared, spoken promise. The chairman moved the hearing to the site of the dispute itself, Pier 14. A card table was set up on the loading dock, the late afternoon sun turning the lake to molten gold. The entire community had come. Dock workers, waitresses from the Gilded Clock, fishermen, all stood in a silent circle. Etta Vale appeared at Mara's side. He cannot give you his luck, she murmured, but you can use this. She pressed the cold, heavy, steel ace of spades into Mara's hand for the anchor. Mara sat, Archer sat opposite her, the seagull ring glinting. You should have stayed a waitress, sweetheart, Archer whispered, loud enough for the first row to hear. He was trying to manipulate the crowd, to paint her as a pawn. You are in over your head. Mara said nothing. She set the steel ace on the felt. She closed her eyes for 1 second, found the 4-4 rhythm. In, 4, hold 4, out, 4. She looked at Archer, not at his face, but at his body. The camera flashes from the reporters were making a muscle in his right temple jump, a tiny, furious spasm. He was not calm. He was enraged. The PEA chairman dealt the single hand, a new deck, new dealer. Mara looked at her cards, a pair of 9s. Archer looked at his and instantly bet half his stack. Mara called. The flop 10, 9, jack. Mara had hit a set, 3 9s, a monster. She kept her breathing steady, her face a mask of polite indifference. Archer bet again, a larger amount, Mara called. The turn a second 10. The board was paired, 10, 9, jack, 10. This was a dangerous card. Her full house, 9s full of 10s, was now vulnerable. If he had a jack, he had a better full house. If he had a 10, he had quads. All in, Archer said, shoving the rest of his chips. This was it. Mara looked for the tells. He was not licking his lips. He was not twisting his ring. He was sitting perfectly still, staring at her, a predator's smile on his face. He looked, for all the world, like a man who had the nuts. But Mara was not looking at his hands or his mouth. She was looking at his eyes. She watched his blink rate. 1, 2, and a tiny, fractional pause. A 0.2 second hesitation before the third blink. A momentary freezing of the muscles. It was not the confidence of a man who had won. It was the paralysis of a man who was terrified he was about to lose and was trying too hard to look confident. She pushed her chips in. I call. You lose, Archer sneered, flipping his cards. He had an ace and a jack. He had a full house. Jacks full of 10s. No, Mara said, her voice quiet. She turned over her 2 9s. 9s full of 10s. The dealer announced, it is the lower hand. Wait. The dealer looked again. The PEA chairman looked. The board was T9JT. Archer had AJ. His hand was TTJJA. Mara had 9. 9. Her hand was 999TT. A full house, the dealer shouted, his voice cracking. 9s full of 10s beats jacks full of 10s. The lady wins. A mistake. Archer had misread the board. His hand was not jacks full. It was just 2 pair. Mara's full house was the only one. The crowd did not cheer. It exploded. The sound, a raw, unified roar of joy from the dockworkers, echoed across the water. Archer Cole stared, his face white, his world ending. The PEA chairman banged his gavel on the metal dock plate. "This matter is closed. The claim is void. The title is confirmed." The aftermath was swift. The newly cleaned UCS announced a voluntary witness protection program, with Mara as its first and very public decliner. The docklight, its charter now a public joke, was seized by the city and donated to the port, where Etta Vale promptly turned it into a community arts and trade school. The sun was setting, a deep, fiery red, painting the pier in light. The ship bells rang, signaling the end of the day. A soft tune was playing from a radio at the Dockers Union Hall. Rafe held out his hand. "May I?" Mara took it, and there, on the loading dock, surrounded by the laughter of the port community, they danced. It was a slow, easy rhythm. His hand a warm, solid presence on her waist, her hand flat against his chest, feeling the steady, calm beat of his heart. He leaned down, and the kiss was light, a promise of the future. Not a relic of the past. It was deep, and it was sure. As they swayed, the imagined camera pulled back, leaving them to their quiet victory. On the wooden railing, forgotten by the players but not by the world, sat the single, heavy, steel ace of spades, gleaming in the last light of the day, a symbol not of a hand won, but of a choice, finally, made free. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let us know. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Story, give this video a like, and if you really loved it, please hit that hype button to help us share this story with even more listeners. Your support means the world.